But it's okay. At least you didn't leave your phone on.
I didn't even alarms only.
Alarms.
Oh,
That was
man. All these ways to get to our attention.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. I'm just trying to make you guys look good.
Yeah, I love
Thanks,
it.
Justin.
This is A New Angle, and I'm your host, Justin Angle, marketing professor at the University of Montana. This podcast is my chance to speak with cool people doing awesome things in and around the great state of Montana. We are proudly underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications. Hey folks, welcome back and thanks for tuning in today. So, coming up on May 1st and 2nd in Bozeman is an amazing event called Athena Pack. This event brings together women interested in having fun, growing, and supporting each other. Today, I bring you a conversation with the creators of this great event, Kim Shappee, Jen Euell, and Nicole Hagerman-Miller. Now, to be clear, all three of these women would be awesome pod guests individually. They do really cool, important work and are key members of this community. But today, we talk about what they've cooked up together. Athena Pack is a super event, probably an adventure too, and I'm excited for you to learn more about it right now. Okay, so we're here today with Nicole Hagerman-Miller, Kim Shappee, and Jen Euell. Ladies, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Yeah. So excited to talk about your endeavor, the Athena Pack, and you're preparing for what, number 3 right now? Number 3 conference?
Correct.
This is the first year it's called Athena Pack. Is it?
That's true, yes.
Change, was the Athena conference before that, right?
Yes.
Okay. What is Athena Pack? Tell us.
The Athena Pack is a 2-day women's leadership event based in Montana with the goal of bringing women from Montana and the Rocky Mountain West together to synergize and have face-to-face connection around best practices in leadership development, leadership training, community leadership, and how to lean into your community, whether that means political action or simply being able to rally troops for a family in need in your community. We're also focused on negotiations and pricing training, so helping women who are business owners do a better job of pricing their product and then also negotiate, because closing the pay gap isn't going to be done unless women have a chance to be better negotiators and get paid better, and then also focusing on basic financial management for women. So a leadership event with women coming together where we focus on those 4 primary components. What did I miss, team?
I think you got it.
You got it. And I think a big part of it is also the, as Kim mentioned, the community in terms of the people who are in the room and how can the women in the room actually activate and help support one another. And that's a big component of it, because I think oftentimes we're all operating in our own work, our own environment, and we're so in it, we're kind of head down, and you forget that there's other people that have been through similar things and have wisdom in the room, and that collective wisdom kind of like rises all of us together. And so that's a big part of it is how do we really tap into the strengths of those who are around us to help us kind of achieve the things that we want and can achieve together.
Sure. So before we get into how all this sort of comes to life, let's talk a little bit about the three of you individually. Jen, so you're with the Women's Foundation of Montana. That's sort of my entry point to your work. Tell us sort of how you became involved in that organization, the role you play in it, and kind of what you saw missing that this Athena Pack project is fulfilling.
Absolutely. So I have been involved with the Women's Foundation for about 8 years now, and I've actually been involved in women's leadership work in Montana for most of my life. And the Women's Foundation is all about economic advancement for Montana women and a brighter future for the girls in our state. So for us, I think that one of the things that we have recognized through our statewide research with women is that they really are missing the opportunity to connect across the state. So one of the things
Connect with other women.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, with lots of things, but definitely with other women is a big piece of it. What we found in our focus groups is that women would identify that they felt like they could access a lot of different resources. They could figure out how to get a higher education, for instance. But one of the things that was lacking was, even if they did, succeed in doing really well in school, that didn't necessarily mean that they were able to figure out how to get a high-paid job that would actually support their family, or, for instance, start a business. Partially because Montana is so rural, and there's not easy access to the kinds of mentorship and networks that you might find in other places. And so the Women's Foundation took it as a part of our work to try and figure out how we could connect women with resources and mentors. So a part of that for us is this Powerhouse Montana network that we've created, which is an online platform to connect women to mentors and resources. But certainly the Athena Conference and now the Athena Pack is a big part of that work as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, Kim, how about you?
I have been working in Montana on women's leadership for some time as well. My background is in finance and banking, and I was lucky enough to help start a small private business bank in Montana called the Bank of Montana. And my time in banking has been very much part of a boys' club, and I've been lucky to be a woman in the room. And Jen is someone who made sure I pulled up a folding chair at the table if there wasn't a chair at the table for me. And I've been lucky enough to have champions like Tom Swenson, who is the main founder of the bank that I was a part of. He's always been an advocate for me and getting me in the room and getting me on boards. And I was the youngest senior credit officer in the country during the Great Recession, to our knowledge, of a bank. And I was also the only woman that was of that age category. So I was going to all these events for bankers in Montana, Idaho, Washington, North Dakota, South Dakota, the Nevadas, and I would be the lone woman in the room. And I often got shunned, sort of inadvertently, from being at the table. And a lot of the culture is kind of around drinking sometimes. Let's go out for drinks after work. Let's go do this. Let's do that. And I'm like, well, I'm pregnant, or I want to have a baby, or like, I'm really not into drinking right now. It's just like an interesting subversive culture. It wasn't like, let's go out for breakfast and talk about credit policies.
Right.
Anyway, my career transitioned into financial advising and wealth management, and I was able to go to some really fantastic national events. But after doing those events, there was a pain point for me in that I was doing it when I had a young child. And so I was traveling really far to these really high-end fancy events that if companies weren't paying for me to go to, there was no way I could have afforded to attend. But attending those events really elevated my business skills and my experience, my negotiating skills, and then how I showed up for my team at work, and then truly with my family and community in terms of leadership. Having someone teach you leadership skills made a difference for me. So that is sort of my succession of how I got to where I am today with being excited about women leaders in Montana.
Yeah, fantastic. Nicole, how about you? I mean, we got introduced, you were working on biomimicry, and I don't know if that's still in your portfolio of activities.
Still is.
Okay.
Yeah. So I primarily, right now, my work is primarily in the space of innovation, and my role in particular is in operations. I am lucky in that I work for 2 women founders, and I'm also essentially the CEO of a B Corp, which is a movement that essentially allows businesses to put other things besides profit as their main goals and are measured on that. So as you can imagine, social justice, equality, all of that is part of how we look at our operations and our performance. So it's always kind of been on my radar as an issue, particularly in wage negotiations from some of my past work. But it really wasn't until Kim, we were talking about this issue that it really surfaced, and the work that Jen does, as like a major like topic of issue and concern, and how we need to activate around that. Because in the bubble I'm in, working for 2 women, where like 70% of our company is women, it didn't feel like I was fighting for a position. It was more of like, I have this luxury, but in the world our company operates in is a little bit different. So my intersection with it was a little different, in the sense that I could see this is how we as a company this is what we're kind of up against. And then coming it back to a Montana-specific topic, in the fact that I'm very passionate about the fact of people who come to school here have to leave in order to have career advancement, or, there's this like common theme where it's like you leave, go get a good job, and then, you get that portfolio, and then you can come back and have a decent income. And I was just like, BS, like that is not how it should be. Like we should have decent jobs here in Montana. Women should have amazing careers and be able to do what they want to do. And we shouldn't let our location be like a luxury that we get, and somehow that limits what we can do in terms of our careers. So that's kind of what like pulled at my heartstrings about this, was the fact that I was passionate about women in Montana being able to have careers and making the impact that they want to make, no matter what industry that they were in. So
we're about to have year 3 of the gathering. Tell us about the first 2 years. What sort of, how did it start? Like, how did you guys come together to launch this thing?
Kim started it.
She really did. I have like a very like vivid memory of like the first moment she talked about it. Which, do you mind if I share?
Please.
Okay. So we were on a river trip with a few girlfriends, and she was kind of sitting there describing, I'm not sure if we had cocktails in hand, maybe not, but we had some sort of beverage, I'm guessing, in hand on the side of the river. And she was talking about it with full passion, as if you know Kim, she's very passionate about a lot of things. And was like, God damn it. And she probably didn't say God damn it, but it was like, I'm sick of traveling to all these events. And I think she had just had maybe one child at that time. And there's so much that we can do in Montana. Like, why do we have to travel to all these places? And I really feel like we could have this kind of conversation and really accelerate what's happening here in Montana. And I want to do it. And I remember looking at her and I was like, you're right. Absolutely. You should. And I'll help you.
So there was nothing happening like this. And you had to go elsewhere, foot the bill, take time away from family. I mean, that's a drag to have to do all that.
If you can travel and you love travel, I would say it's like a socioeconomic privilege to be able to do it. But can you imagine if you're a rural Montana woman who's trying to figure it out and lean into her community and doesn't have those sort of resources?
But I even think there's like an awareness factor too. Like, even if you can't afford it, if it's so far away, if it's in the big city, or if it just seems so abstract, it might not even become on your radar screen. Like, there's
be relevant.
That there's these sorts of opportunities out there. Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
So first 2 years, right?
Incredible challenge.
Yeah. You're making something from nothing.
Yeah, truly that startup business cycle that we've all been in, but to do it together, and then with so many big personalities, and this is a big state, and Jen can talk about this better, but trying to get someone from every part of the state to come and represent different communities and not have anyone be left out, and then also bring one of the things that I think differentiates our event is we try and bring world-class talent to Montana. Sure. And it's the largest line item on our budget is what we pay for speakers. And so getting the talent to Montana has been amazing, but it's also really hard and means we're on the phone at like all hours pitching and cold calling and trying to get people to come. And that is a lot of work.
Absolutely. I mean, what's the craziest thing you had to do to get somebody to come? I mean, you guys asked me before we started recording, like, hey, how do you get guests, and what's your strategy there? And so, like, who are some of your dream invites when you were cooking up this idea? Like, we're going to get such and so here, we're going to do that.
We have a long list of dream invites.
Do.
Well, I was just looking at the guest list for this year, and it's amazing. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but like, how'd the first year kind of come together?
The first year, I think we put together in like 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
It was insane.
Wow, 3 months.
Yeah, that conversation on the river happened in June, and we did the event in October.
Yeah.
So you were able to get a venue, get guests, get financing, all that stuff, and boom.
Hustle.
Yeah.
Hustle, exactly.
And sometimes that works to your benefit. Like, I think that was a big learning in the second year. It was like, okay, the first year we just made it all happen because we didn't know, so we had a little bit of naivete to our benefit.
Yeah, it sometimes works in your favor.
Yeah, but the second time, I think we even planned for all the timing, but then there was all these new variables, and as you learn with events, I mean, it's always like, how do you make it bigger, better? And so, of course, we were like 2 days, and then when we stretched it from 1 day to 2 days, there was a whole new set of variables there. But I would say the learning curve, I mean, every year it's something new. But I feel like the third time around, like the second year, I think was a big learning curve for us. And I think this year we're capitalizing on some of that a little bit, or leveraging some of that a little bit. It's
the feedback we got the second year was that our event was much better than the first year, though.
Okay.
So that felt really rewarding.
And you had some return customers, I guess, too.
Quite a few
which is
return
great.
customers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. The other thing, just in terms of asking about what speakers we were able to get and how to get them, so funny we all work in these different overlapping circles, but to have, like, for me to follow people from the finance industry, and then Nicole's world is so fun and tech and innovation based, and then Jen's world, she knows about a lot of leaders that we might not have on our radar. Same with Sarah. It's really fun, but also can be hard because we're all pitching speakers at the same time. Yeah. And then I'd be like, I've got a call with Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach. And she's like, well, I've got a call with the COO of Google. And I've got this person that you've never heard of from Carnegie Mellon who's amazing. How are we going to fit them all in?
Sure. And well, gosh, I mean, those choices have to be, it's sort of like when you're overwhelmed with choice, it's a luxury, but at the same time, it creates difficult management challenges.
It does, but I would say it organically works out, right? Because like to have like 5 all-star speakers, like you've got to ask 20.
Sure.
You know, so it so far it's working out, because I think that's just how pipeline conversion works.
Right.
You know, you've got to put a lot out there, and I think what's exciting and fun about all of our backgrounds is that we have such a diverse network, but there's a really clear intersection of all of them. And I think that's part of what we see happening in the work in terms of like social and environmental, you know, all these like topics that are of interest to everyone, like they're all starting to kind of merge, and which makes these conversations incredibly dynamic, and allows for, I think, a lot of benefit essentially to come out of them at a local level.
Sure. A New Angle is underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot Communications, 2 cool companies doing awesome things all over Montana.
Hi, this is Mike Morelli, Director of the Entertainment Management Program at the University of Montana, and you are listening to A New Angle.
I also think, and then I'll let Jen interject anything, the theme of be bold, be luminous, shine theory, and then our theme this year of being brave. I'm on this kick right now that with courage, there's always a little bit of rage in it. Mm-hmm. And this kind of event came out of a pain point, right? Like it was like, why can't we do this here? Why do we have to go so far? But the idea of bounce and persistence together, and bounce is maybe a turn from Daniel to Sell is Human. That book is so good. But the idea of like getting rejected a lot, like I get rejected a lot right now, related to the work with Athena and trying to find great speakers or special discounts on venues and promotions, and being able to get back up and have bounce again, and then have teammates that are going to pull you back up when you've kind of been beat down a little bit. And the theme of be brave, like we are being brave in our actions and trying to put this together and hope people come.
Yeah. And so let's shift gears and talk about this event coming up May 1st in Bozeman.
And 2nd.
1st and 2nd. Okay,
Yes.
so we're on the 2-day thing. Done. Okay, May 1st and 2nd in Bozeman. You've got some incredible speakers lined up. Tell us what somebody can expect in that 2-day experience.
Okay. Well, a lot is going to happen. But there's a couple things that we're driving towards. One is that we want women to feel like they just have space. So often, and I think this is like true to everybody, like we go through these motions like to the next, and there's like no pause. I recently heard this line, like between stimulus and response there is a pause, and take it. And I think as women in particular, we are constantly on the move, trying to whether it's between job and family, career, community, whatever. And so there's very little space that women take for themselves where they don't feel guilty.
Yeah.
And so what we're really trying to create is 2 days that is just for you. And the first 2 days the first day we're super excited because we have 2 workshops on topics that we think are utmost of important, and one is, of course, finance, and the second is telling your story. In a world that everything is driven by social media and presence and communication, how do you tell your own story so that people listen and you can effectively communicate? So that's kind of the first day, the workshop flow. However, if that's not your jam, we've also really created a space where you can come and learn about how to write your bio, how to have conversations with potential employers, and get a professional headshot done. A lot of people don't even have kind of basic, portfolio building things such as that.
Yeah, or wouldn't even know how to go about doing it.
Right, or it's too expensive, or whatever it may be. So that's kind of the first day. We've also collaborated with some local businesses in Bozeman to offer discounts for people who just need a little retail therapy or whatever it might be. So that's kind of day one. We have what we call a birds of a feather dinner, where we have kind of topics that that are somewhat curated around either finance or communication or strategy. And so people choose what dinner they want to go to. They go out to dinner. And then the second day is really like our full day of curated content, where we have keynote speakers. And then kind of our flow that we've tried to work hard to keep is that we have a speaker, but then we also, on the back end of that, have space to then integrate what that speaker talked about. So if you hear someone talk about mission, vision, values, that's all awesome and you get excited, but then it's the next speaker and then you don't actually have time to digest, marinate, or do anything about that. So what we're trying to do is have someone, and what we are doing is have someone talk and then actually have the white space to do the work to integrate that and create an action flow for what are you going to do once you leave here. And that's been integrated throughout our whole day. The other thing that we've integrated is actually like creativity. There's little space in our environment today for creativity, and creativity is such a huge part of like how we advance as humans. So we're doing a lot with just having space to make some sort of a keychain, for example, something really simple, or having someone walk us through a dance or watch a visual performance of performing arts. So just things that actually activate and stimulate different parts of our brain that we don't get on a regular basis.
There's a question kind of occurred to me as you were laying that out, Nicole. That a lot of reasons for this conference to occur. I mean, things like it happening elsewhere that are too hard to get to, too expensive, too distant, whatever. But Kim, something you also said about, you were often the lone woman in this world that was very male-oriented and also created by men. So it sort of rewarded male behaviors in many ways, whether it's going out drinking or just sort of the body language around the table operates differently. Are there things about sort of the traditional conference model that don't work for the way women interact and learn and grow? Is that something you've thought about at all?
Well, if you're a parent and you don't have time to step out to help with the emotional load, or for me, I mean, I hope this is okay to talk about, and I'm assuming it is, but It was the breastfeeding. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this conference with all these men, and I've got to pack this big bag, and I've got to have a concierge freeze this milk for me so I can bring it back, and I can't be in meetings back to back. Like, I need to be able to step out and have a space. And I'd say in the last 5 to 10 years, it's become a lot more common to have a nursing space or a storage for milk space, which is wonderful. But then I also think that we have yoga in the morning, we have trail running throughout the day, we have really good food at our event, and then the coffee and connection is different than a lot of the events I've gone to, and these two have heard me talk about it. It's like almost always an ex-military person speaking, or an NFL or NBA star that comes to tell us the story.
Prototypical male kind of
Totally.
story, yeah.
And I really respect those people and think those are wonderful stories, but there are other stories out there that weren't being told that for some reason left me feeling like a little disenfranchised.
It makes me think too, as you were saying, I think the other thing that we experienced as part of the event is that the women that come, everyone in that room has an incredible story. Like, just because the person on stage is speaking doesn't mean that their story is better or more exciting than the person in the room. And what we really tried to figure out, and we're integrating more this year, is how do we give a platform to the women who are in the room who have a really important story to tell, or have wisdom that they can share to other women in the room that could really benefit from hearing their story. And I think that's something that we're fighting in as a culture, is like the loudest voice kind of gets heard. And so how do you enable like the collective wisdom of the group to be heard? And I think that's something we'll constantly, because like you can't have like 200 women talking at all at the same time, or 200 speakers, but it's something we're trying to kind of create that space for.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think a lot about like politics, for example. It's a game that was sort of created by men and tends to reward male behaviors. Loudest voice in the room, for example, one of those behaviors. And then when we have groups that are traditionally less advantaged or minority in status, they tend to feel like they sometimes have to play the existing game better. Whereas maybe that's a bad game.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a better game to play, and we should play it differently. Things like that. I mean, so what you're doing makes me think of like what are the assumptions that just needs to be totally thrown out in the way that the sort of male-dominated world is structured, business, finance, storytelling, whatever it is.
This is a small anecdote that I think is relatively applicable. Finance is so interesting because women are often less confident than men when asked about their investment knowledge. But then when someone goes back and backtests how much knowledge does each party have, women often have just as much, if not more knowledge than men. And something that's fun about this event is when we talk about finances, usually we have different tables and women end up sharing their own stories. And I've found that women are much quicker to share, like, I'm stressed out about this financially, or I'm excited about this from a wealth management perspective, than men. Like, they're much quicker to usually unveil what's
There's
really
less
going on
ego
there.
involved in it, I think. Don't you think?
Once there's a group.
Yeah.
Huh. How does that work? Talk more about that.
Well, it's more of like, as long as there's someone brave in this circle. And I think we've found that like in the group that are there, once someone shares that, then it kind of opens the conversation and it becomes kind of like that safety in numbers element. We're like, oh, she had a really shitty experience too. Like, I can now talk about mine, versus like we all have to pretend we're perfect and we all got it buttoned up and we're all like rocking it in our own worlds and not like dropping a beat, and it's just like, as soon as someone says, well, man, I'm really missing it on all these places, then it's like, oh, phew, she's not perfect.
How does that happen? Who takes the first leap here? Like, is taking the first leap going to Athena Pack, or just, are there things that you've tried to create in the experience that facilitate these sorts of openings?
Let me touch back. Can I touch back on Shine Theory really quick? Or do you want to talk about Shine Theory?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a big part of what the message is that allows that space to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what I wanted to speak to is this. We know from research that if women are in an environment that is primarily women, there can be some men there, but if it's the majority men, then they're far less likely to speak up. If it is a group that is primarily women, at least at this point in history, are far more likely to both speak up, to share, especially to share stories and more personal information, which is what we're talking about, which is really what's necessary. They're more likely to be vulnerable, I guess, is what I would say, which is where we need to be in order to grow. And so I think that's the space that we try and create together, is a space in which women are celebrated for who they are, where all voices get heard and not just, the loudest voice, a space where we welcome innate wisdom and are educated by each other, and from that we create our own community of support, the Athena Pack. And Shine Theory is basically just the idea of that, of celebrating each other and shining a light on what's brilliant in each of us and inviting that to the table so that together we're not missing out on unrealized potential.
And so the Shine Theory, has this been a guiding sort of philosophy of the event from the start, or is this something you're sort of leaning into more this year, or how's that kind of evolved?
I think it's been around since the
It's been
beginning.
since the beginning. I know Kim really was a big driver of it. And we talked about it as a shiny conference. And I remember one of my favorite moments was when her son came into the conference and was like, is this all the shiny women? Because Kim had been talking about how women need to, be shiny to one another. So I think Kim's really been a good leader in integrating that from the very beginning.
And I think it's such a nice thing to talk about with other women, to just lay it on the table.
Yeah.
And, being candid about your finances, but also saying who are the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and are those people helping you be better, and are you inspired by them, and do you leave those encounters with fantastic action items for goodness, or do you leave feeling a void or sad or anything less than wonderful, and where is that coming from? One thing I do want to touch on is I don't know if as a culture we've given men the opportunity to be vulnerable around their finances. Like I just can't imagine me going to that conference right now where all the men that are financial managers are going to talk about their poor financial performance last year and how that went. But I think women are doing a good job of embracing that there is strength and vulnerability, and then how can we help men make that an okay dialogue?
Well, that goes to the point of, just because this is the game that we've been playing for years and years and years doesn't mean it's the right game or a good game, or doesn't have the right incentives or all those things.
Paternity leave right there. My husband gets such a hard time in his community, which is his work community, engineers, that he stays home a certain day a week, or that he's going to lean in and take the kids to school or do something around healthcare and sickness. And why am I not the one doing that? His wife. And I'm always surprised by that. But we need men that are going to stand up and come to the Athena conference event, the Athena Pack, because it's not something we're going to do alone.
How many men have come to past events? I know you talk about being very open and encouraging to people who identify with all genders coming. What's typical kind of attendance profile?
So we've had a good amount of male speakers who have been wonderful, and then usually I would say like 5% attendees are male, and they're often taking care of their wife's child, like, the family child, and their wife is attending, and they're coming to help out a little bit, and they attend what they can and sort of audit, but then they also leave to go to the park. Is that fair?
That's fair. And I think we throw a fabulous cocktail party, and we have a few of our kind of I would say part of our network, men who support the work that we're doing, come to that. And I think it's a fun dynamic to have men who particularly are advocate and who are saying, what do we do to help this? And those are the men who are kind of showing up and having a voice. And so it's so we always encourage them to participate as well.
Yeah. Another question I have is, and the 3 of you seem like you run totally counter to this sort of observation I have, but noticed in workplaces, social settings, that often women aren't supportive of other women in ways that they can be. Is that something that resonates with you? I mean, there's a form of competition that I've observed in organizations amongst women that is different than it is amongst men or between men and women, and it's not always as positively oriented as the culture you're describing in the event, in the world that you're trying to create.
Well, I would say there's kind of 2 things to that. One is that's what shine theory is trying to address, and the kind of the glass, is it the glass cliff? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like those 2 theories are
glass cliff. Interesting. I've
Kim
heard of the glass ceiling.
that.
That's well known. Glass cliff. What's that?
The glass cliff is that women are elevated to positions of power in times of duress or stress, and then women are less likely to be successful in that leadership position because they've been given a sinking ship, usually. And the recession is a great example of women were elevated to leadership positions, and then they were inherited companies
Is
or
the theory
entities.
that those are explicit elevations, like set these women up to fail, or is it just sort of situational?
I think it's more situational, Jen. Am I wrong there?
No, I would say, that it's more situational. But I do think it's an interesting sort of cultural phenomena. I just think that a lot of times organizations and companies are in a place when they're in dress that they're willing to maybe hire in a way that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, okay.
So
that's
thinking
reasonable.
maybe what we need is something entirely different. But unfortunately, a lot of times women step in at that moment in time when, their role in their job is so much harder than it could be. It's been an interesting piece of research that came out in the last few years.
So I think going back to your question, it's that's what we're trying to That's what we're trying to change.
Okay.
Is because like if women at the table, and I think with Shine Theory, instead of trying to compete against that person, it's saying, Kim, that was a really great idea. If we're in a meeting and Kim suggests something, and then 5 minutes later a male counterpart suggests the same thing, but the room only hears what the male says, it's my job as the other woman in the room to make sure that that was Kim's idea. So to do that, and I think the women of the Obama administration were a big kind of driver of getting some spotlight on this, but to say, like, as soon as Kim would say something, I'd be like, Kim, that's an excellent idea, and like reinforce it right away.
Okay.
So that everyone in the room knows that was Kim's idea.
It's on the record.
It's on and then it can't be like someone else taking it, because we've all been in that situation where you say something and then 10 minutes later someone says the exact same thing and their room is like, yeah, that's great. And you're like, but I just said that, And so I think with Shine Theory, it's supporting that, so that as women we're recognizing that was your decision. But I think it also kind of has to, it has to come back to, there's more than one position that women can go into. And I think that's what drives a lot of that non-collaboration, is like, there's only one position for, say, all three of us to go into. So therefore, we're competing, and we're not motivated to elevate one another, because then that's my position. So it gets women in a really awkward environment, in that they're competing against one another, but essentially they should be collaborating, and there should be more career opportunities for women to evolve into, versus trying to compete with one another. And I think that's a lot. That's what I see drive a lot of the competitiveness versus the collaboration, is that this fear of only having one opportunity and it's the other woman in the room who's going to take it.
Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Scarcity.
I would say, it's an old model of
It is.
thinking to me.
I think it's changing.
The one in which women felt like, oh, maybe there's only going to be one woman hired, and so it's either going to be me or you. And I think that's changing today, as a culture and amongst women, because I think we can together imagine a world in which there's enough space for all of us and enough abundance for everyone to do well and to support each other.
And I also think it's that modeling the way in terms of being a fantastic leader, and you have to inspire a shared vision. So being articulate about what is the vision of the future, where there's enough room for everyone, and then also talking about Shine Theory and ways to operate so that people can model the way in their own organizations or communities or tribes, that, of course, there's enough room.
Yeah.
So registration closes April 14th. The conference is on the 1st and 2nd. Let's talk about, I don't want you to necessarily single out guests as ones you're particularly excited about, but let's single out some guests. I know Whitney Williams is a keynote speaker. I know the head of sustainability at Lululemon is, I can't recall her name, but who are some of the highlights that you're really excited to bring to Montana and share with your audience?
We're really excited about Ali Baumbach, who won Sundance in 2018 for the film On Her Shoulders. So that should be really fun. I want Nicole to tell you about Tara Nicole Nelson. And then we're bringing in Bethany Dufour from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, and she has a lot of experience at Georgetown University and Babson College, my alma mater, doing formal leadership training. And she's a wonderful, wonderful speaker and dynamic person. And something that we found the first year is that just because someone has exceptional credentials and experience doesn't mean they're a great speaker and doesn't mean they can lead women from the stage in an activity that's going to help them drive change.
I work at a university. I'm familiar with this phenomenon.
It's so interesting. And we were all so disappointed at times to be, like that message didn't get across. So Bethany delivers there, and not only the messaging, but helping people put that into action in their life. Will you tell us about Tara?
Yeah. So I was recently at a Women Changing World Summit and saw Tara deliver this incredible talk. And she has her own kind of philosophy around writing, and how spending 10 days just free writing is this way to kind of support creativity and performance. And so she kind of has her own thing there, but she does this really cool exercise, and I won't give too much of it away. But in Game of Thrones, there's a woman, and I am like the one person who doesn't watch this
Yeah, there's
show,
two in the
so
room.
forgive
I
me.
haven't
Okay,
either.
I've
good,
never
great.
watched
Oh, look at that.
Oh wow, we're like the
Oh, good. Kim knows.
So there's a character in the show. I don't know who it is, but she takes over other communities or villages or kingdoms, as you will. And when she does, she adds their kingdom onto her name. So she says like, "I am Nicole. I take over Missoula, Montana," and that is like first of her name. Like this, like it's like declaring like your victory and like this is what I've overcome and this is what I've done. I'm totally butchering like how amazing this is, but she kind of walks you through, what are the things that you have done and accomplished and are so proud of. And what was so powerful in having do an exercise like this was then having the women in the room share it out. And I was just like jaw dropped of like, one, the eloquence of the women in the room in terms of how they were able to speak to what they have done, and what, writing does to kind of support that communication. And then just the sheer volume of impressiveness around each individual that actually spoke, and I'm sure everyone in that room, when you actually just take a moment to reflect, to be like, this is what I've done, this is what I'm doing. And I think we often, going back to what we were saying earlier, like we don't hold space for that at all. So she's going to walk us through some exercises there. And then one of the panels I'm also really excited about that Whitney's going to lead is a Trailblazing Women's Summit. And we're bringing in some women who have had experience, who have a little bit more wisdom, over 50, who have been in who have established careers, particularly in politics. And one of the topics that we're really passionate about right now is how do we have empathy for people who don't think the way that you do, or who are in different social circles or have different values. And so how do you have conversations with people in those spaces so that you can actually be productive as a society? And so we're really excited about a group of women who are going to come from both sides of the aisle and talk about how they've overcome these challenges, particularly in the political setting, because we do feel a sense of urgency, I would say, around getting women activated in politics.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that'll be a good session.
Yeah. And okay, so before we close, I want to know who should attend. Who's your sort of prototypical customer that needs this? But maybe each of you could offer like a notion or different persona of who would attend. Do you want to start, Jen?
Well, I think the beauty of it is that I think women of all ages and sort of backgrounds and interests could really benefit from this. And honestly, the experience is richer when we have all kinds of different women and men, hopefully a few men as well, at the table. So I don't know that there's any one. I think that what I would say is that if you are in a place where you feel like there is transition and possibility happening in your life, then I think Athena Pack is a great place to really make that happen as a sort of a space of catalyst. So that's what I would say.
Excellent.
I think it's important to do periodic life audits and look at like, how do I think I'm performing? How happy am I in these different realms? And if you're not at a 10 in every area, if you're not at a 10 for your career, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, or 0, if you're not at a 10 in your relationship, if you're not at a 10 for family, 10 for community, and definitely if you're below a 7, I think this is a wonderful way to make some change towards moving towards that 10 and living a bold, big, exciting life.
Super.
Sorry.
I love it. I would add to that that if you can come to a place where you are willing and wanting to be both a teacher and a student and can learn or wanting to learn, but then also wanting to share wisdom, I think that adds to the collectiveness of the group and what we're trying to do with this community. And I think if you just need like 2 days to like pause for yourself and be like, wow, I haven't done anything for myself in 10 years.
It's time.
Or 2.
Overdue.
Take it. Yeah, it's really designed to really to be for you.
Justin, sorry. One thing someone told me is that it's intimidating. And that was disappointing for me because we so don't want to create an environment that's intimidating. And this person had never been. And it was simply from like reading the website. And usually that says something more about the person than the event we're putting on.
Yeah.
But we are like a very friendly event. Nicole attended Summit last year in LA, and she talked about this experience where you had to look at everyone in the room and walk around and hold hands with these random attendees
so intense.
and not say anything and just stare into their eyes for 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Don't worry, we won't be doing that at our event.
Yeah.
But the idea of connecting with people, it's something I've been trying to do more since she told me about that experience, like looking at everyone I walk past on the street and smiling at people and just like searching for that humanity in the other person. And our event is very welcoming. So don't be intimidated.
And I would say if you're in a place as well where you really are looking to create that kind of support group or advisory board to help you kind of move to the next level, this is a great place.
Yeah, building your personal board of directors. Yeah, this is a great group for that.
So how does a listener learn more about it? How does a listener learn how to go sign up and commit and jump in? And
Website is theathenapack.com or theathenaconference.com. We have an Instagram. You can follow us there, or you can reach out to any of us.
Awesome. We will post all those links on our show notes, and I am super stoked about this. I hope my wife Maggie attends. I've been trying to tell her, trying to encourage her to
Please
attend.
do.
I think you've met Maggie, Kim.
I know Maggie. She's wonderful.
Yeah, I think so too. But yeah, to your point, like she fits the category of all these sorts of things. Needs to invest more in herself and all those sorts of things. Super excited to learn more about this event. Best of luck, and hopefully in a few years we'll be talking about year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of that.
Thanks, Justin.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us.
All right, super. Check out Athena Pack. It is going to be awesome. Register, support this great work. Okay, next week we've got Emily Grassley, creator and host of the hugely successful Brain Scoop YouTube channel and the chief curiosity correspondent at the Chicago Field Museum. Emily stopped by the pod on her recent visit to UM, where she was honored at this year's Odyssey of the Stars, a showcase of all things happening at the College of Visual and Performing Arts. Thanks for listening to A New Angle. We really appreciate it. And remember that A New Angle was brought to you by CED, Consolidated Electrical Distributors. By now, you all know that they're big and they pretty much sell everything electrical you would ever need. But what you might not know is that they hire a ton of our students. If you want to learn more about job opportunities at CED, visit cedcareers.com. It's a great website name. Before we go, I want to thank some important peeps. Comzar, Elizabeth Willie, executive producer, Stefan Borsum, producer, Aidan Morton, and interns, Aspen Runkle, Max Gibson, and Ellie Hanasek. Huge thanks to VTO, Jeff Ament, and John Wicks for the tunes, and finally, props to Jeff Meese, our master of all things sound. Before we go, if you have any questions, suggestions, comments, insults, whatever, please email me at anewangle@umontana.edu. Help us spread the word and be sure to use the hashtag #anewangle when you do. Thanks a lot. See you next time.